everybody. Welcome to a special edition of the HOKA NAZ Elite Midday Treat Podcast. I am Coach Ben Rosario, but today I will be serving as host for our podcast and interviewing our normal host, Eric Senseman, along with his good friend, Jim Walmsley. You probably know Jim, or at least have heard of Jim. He is one of the best ultra runners in the entire world. He and Eric will be running the very famous Western States 100 in a couple of weeks, less than a couple of weeks. And I was able to sit down with them about 12 or so days out from the race. And we certainly talked about Western States, but we also talked about ultra running in general, the different mindset that it takes. And then we talked about the crossover appeal and what marathoners might make good ultra runners and what it might mean for Jim to step down from ultra and back into the shorter distance world and try a half marathon or a marathon and maybe even running at the Olympic trials. Those are some of the topics that are often discussed on message boards and Twitter and things like that, and we were able to actually just ask Jim about them, and he gave us some really candid answers, and it was, personally for me, a super interesting hour. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Eric Senseman and Jim Walmsley. Here we go. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Midday Treat with NAZ Elite Podcast. We're switching it up today, and Eric Senseman, who's usually our fine host, is actually going to be a guest today, and I'll serve as host, and Jim Walmsley is our other guest. So Jim represents HOKA One on the trails in the ultra world. If you're watching and you're an ultra fan, you absolutely know who Jim is, and you know who Eric is, and you know who the Coconino Cowboys are. But maybe if you're a fan of NAZ Elite and the road marathon world and the track world, maybe you don't know as much about these guys. And so I think we have a cool kind of, or I hope anyway, a cool kind of crossover audience today. And don't fear, if you're an ultra fan and you like the hardcore stuff, I promise we will get to that. So just give me a minute to kind of introduce these guys and get the other half of the crowd sort of up to speed, and then we'll just dig in. These guys have the Western States 100 in less than 2 weeks, which is, I'll let them explain, but it's you could call it the pinnacle event of the ultra world every year, annually. And I got to go to it last year, which sort of kickstarted my fascination with ultra running, which had already begun living in Flagstaff and knowing some of these guys. And so I want to get into all of that, and I promise it's super interesting stuff. Again, if you're not someone who's familiar with the ultra world, it's really quite interesting and very super cool. So what I wanted to do was kind of, again, for the people who may not be as familiar with these two, just sort of let them introduce themselves a little bit, and then we'll dig into the world of ultra. So maybe it'd be cool if Eric starts. Again, he's our host usually, and maybe you don't know that much about him if you've watched our pods. He just asks all these great questions, but he doesn't get to talk about himself. So maybe take us through your journey into ultra, because it is a little bit of a different journey, and then what brought you to Flag.
Sure. Well, I want to start by asking, have I been promoted or relegated?
Yeah,
now that you're in charge.
I'm not, I think it's a parallel move.
It's a parallel move, I like that. Right, so I got started in ultra running in 2011, 7 years ago now. Had a brief foray into, I suppose, the road marathons, but it was more pedestrian than elite. My first marathon was 3:37. That was my debut.
Okay.
Got it down to 2:36.
Knocked an hour off.
Knocked an hour off, yeah. I should, it'd be nice. In my head, when I started marathoning, I was knocking off big chunks of time, and I was like, I just got to keep doing this. I'll be running 2:18 in no time. That didn't quite happen. But I got into ultras partly because I wasn't as competitive on the roads, and starting to find a little bit of success here after quite a while, 6-7 years. So I won the JFK 50 mile last year in 2017. Jim here's a 3-time winner. He won the 3 previous editions. Yeah, so if you've won JFK, there's a lot of possibilities. That's the way I look at it. Yeah, trajectory is up. And then I raced my way into Western States this year by finishing 4th at the Lake Sonoma 50 mile in April. And that's, kind of a barn burner, fast, mid-distance ultra. 50 miles kind of mid-distance for the ultra scene. And so I'll be lining up in Squaw here in a couple weeks. But yeah, I came from like I played football in high school. I found running in college, so started later in life, and I think that's what Ben means in terms of maybe a non-traditional introduction to the sport. But it's cool because you can just be a 195-pound dude who likes to weightlift, and after 8 years, you can be a decent ultra runner. So it's that's kind of neat.
And Jim here, I'll let him introduce himself, but again, if you're familiar with the ultra world, you definitely know the name Jim Walmsley. He's become one of the more recognizable figures in the sport worldwide, globally. Again, represents HOKA One as do we at NAZ Elite, so he's kind of a part of the family, and he's certainly become a big figure here in Flagstaff over the last few years as he's risen, I should say, to such great heights in the ultra world. So, but your path to ultra running, yeah. I hesitate to say it's more traditional because in a lot of ways, there's nothing traditional about the ultra world. It's very unique and attracts all sorts of different personalities and backgrounds. But at least if you're watching and you're part of the marathon world, I think it's maybe a little bit more traditional path as you would recognize it. So talk a little bit about your history and how you got into it.
I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona, so 2 hours south of Flag. Ran in high school and then ran at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs for college up till 2012 when I graduated. And then I kind of had a couple years in the Air Force where just kind of running pretty casually for, I guess, most post-collegiates kind of flirt with the really fit non-runners, I guess, at that point. And then ended up getting out of the Air Force in 2015 and kind of deciding if I wanted to go back to school, get a real job, or just do something else. And I decided running was really making me happy, and I was just learning about this ultra trail world that exists out there as a runner that just did track and cross country in high school and college. I didn't know much about it. I probably was in the majority of that community that just kind of pokes fun at the 8-10 minute miles and just like, these guys, anyone can shuffle 8-minute miles for 100 miles, but in reality it's become a lot more complicated than that as I've gotten into it, and we're not just jogging on a track, we're not just jogging on a road. We get quite the amazing terrain to run over, and mountain passes and mountain tops. And for me, I've really enjoyed the process of the training. It's much more aerobic based for me, less workout intense, which I found more consistent health with that. And I'm just really enjoying where it's taken me now.
Yeah. Well, I want to get back to those different paths and explore the different personality traits that seem to be common among ultra runners. Again, because I think one of the cool things about maybe this pod and the audience we have in this pod is there might be people out there thinking about getting into it, and maybe some of the things you guys will say and can bring to their attention might be that light bulb moment for them to kind of give it a shot. But I did want to, so we can get everybody excited, explain a little bit about Western States and have you guys kind of explain what a big deal it is. Again, I went last year. It was actually, so it's kind of like going to the Masters for your first golf tournament ever or something, I imagine, because I had never really been to a true ultra race before, and the USA Track Champs were in Sacramento, so myself and a couple of the athletes shot on over to Auburn to watch Western States last year and watch Jim run, and it was pretty mind-blowing experience. So I guess explain the Western States 100, and then maybe we'll discuss like the varying terrain and just the difficulty and why it's become so popular.
Yeah, well, I'd say we're two good people to talk about this, largely because Jim can talk about it from a perspective of racing it, having raced it twice. I haven't raced it, but I've crewed and paced twice, so we kind of have a little bit different perspectives. From my perspective, I was asked this recently, and people refer to Western States as like the Super Bowl of ultra running, and what that means for ultra running is a little bit different from football, but like there's 1,500 volunteers at the race, by way of example, to tell you kind of the scale, and you have people there that are genuinely spectating. Like they're not there to crew anyone, they're not there to pace anyone, they're out there to watch people run. So much more in line with like a road marathon or something more mainstream. So it brings the sport kind of to the limelight in a way that no other race really does. It's on a very big scale, I guess is the best way to kind of describe it.
I'd interject that it's considered like the Super Bowl of North America.
Of course, right.
And then of trail ultra. Because
that's fair.
It's definitely the biggest, most prestigious one in the U.S. and North America, but on a global scale, there's other really good races. UTMB is probably considered a bigger ultra race, and then it's definitely a bigger presentation for sure. And then Comrades is kind of known as the big road race, where it's just a huge festival. But what kind of also makes Western States unique is there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of build up, and everybody everyone spends months just in our little world speculating what's going to happen at Western States this year, who's going to do what, and so there's a lot of build up to it, and people really tune into Western States much more so than a lot of the other races as a whole community.
Well, and I think one thing that's attractive about it and interesting about it to even the casual observer is just, and I understand that there's difficulty in every course, especially when you get a 100-mile race, there's in and of itself that's difficult.
Right.
But the terrain is really crazy because you're starting way up high. There can be snow at the beginning of the race, and yet tens of miles later, it can be 95, 100 degrees or more as you get down to the very bottom of the course. So just take the listeners or the viewers through the course a little bit.
Yeah, I guess I'll start again. But to get back to what Jim said earlier, like you look at the terrain that we're running on, very, very different from what people would be familiar with who are coming from a track or a road background. So just by way of example, it starts at about 6,200 feet above sea level, 6,500 feet above sea level. You get up to 8,700 feet within the first 5 miles, 4.5 miles. So you're way up in the high country. The low point on the course is less than 1,000 feet above sea level. I think it's about 500. So it's a net downhill course. You end up climbing almost 18,000 feet over the course of the day, or more than a day in some people's case. The course limit's 30 hours, I think. And then you descend 23,000 feet over that 100-mile distance. So you're going in and out of canyons, which are getting very hot.
Across rivers.
Across rivers, yep. Jim's got some stories there. So I'll let Jim speak more to the course. But yeah, the point being it's much more extreme terrain.
And I will ask real quick, is it one of the more challenging courses then, overall? Or is it just the other things that you mentioned, the hype and the tradition of the, how long it's been around, et cetera, et cetera?
I would say it attracts kind of on a pointy end of the field. It is, because the amount of competitiveness that it has for the ultra sport is there, combined with really hot conditions and then a lot of ways to fall into traps to make mistakes. Essentially, it's very tricky that way. Just to run 100 miles is pretty tough, and kind of the harder the day you have out there, the harder it becomes to get across that distance. But
I think to directly answer the question, it's hard to compare, I think. But like Hard Rock, for example, Hard Rock 100, it's run in Colorado, and the San Juan Mountains has, is it 33,000 feet of climbing, 33,000 feet of descent? And you're at high elevations.
Low points, 7,600 feet.
And you get up to over 14,000 feet. So it's difficult, I suppose, to to directly compare, but it's not an easy one. I think
Yeah, but then it's kind of a slippery slope of if you just get into what's the hardest, then there's these like torture races. That's when you get into like the Netflix Barclays Marathon.
Yep.
Sure.
You get into the same race director has a race where essentially you can only do like a lap, maybe it's like an 8-mile lap, and you can only do it once every 2 hours. Like every time you have to set off with at the same time.
Okay.
So no matter what, you can keep running the whole time if you want. So a considerably slow runner can keep up with everyone, but it limits the fast runner. So he tries to make the variable who's toughest. And that race goes for like about 60 hours, and people just, they go for another lap, and and it's just such a mind. Where maybe even by our standards, ours is a little less sickening and a little more realistic.
Yeah. Well, and again, I swear, I promise, the ultra fans already know a lot of this stuff, so it's a little boring for them. But the race began as a horse race, Western. Yeah. So they used to run or ride horses through this entire 100-mile course until a quote-unquote crazy guy tried to do it himself on foot. And then that's how Western States 100 started as a foot race. Am I?
Yeah. It started as the Tevis Cup, and the Tevis Cup still overlaps in a lot of ways with the Western States. They still run that race. I think maybe August.
It's later in the year, yeah.
And it started out where Gordy Ainsley is the guy that started it. He basically had a horse that I think went limp or something, and he decided I wasn't going to run on, like, he's a bigger, like, he's a Clydesdale himself. But he's also like probably a 2:30 marathoner Clydesdale guy of like, for his size, he moves real swiftly. But he decided he was going to run with his horse one year, and then the next year he's like, I'm not even going to be on a horse. I'm going to run the race with my feet. And then the legend was born there, and it's technically the world's oldest 100-mile trail race in the world.
Very cool.
Which adds to that prestige.
I think the mystique is...
but it is a imperial distance. So, like, Europe's not going to create a 100-mile distance race.
Right.
They have like the Spartathlon that's much further than that, but so there's other history stuff. So it's easy to get wrapped up in the numbers on the surface, but as you get into the sport, you learn a lot about a lot of other history, old timers running really fast, and other races that are just you never had heard of that are just as crazy and just as amazing.
Got it.
Well, and that history, I think, is what a big part of the draw with Western States.
And that's my next question.
Yeah.
Why Western States for you guys?
Yeah.
So Jim and Eric are, you mentioned the pointy end. They're at the kind of the top level of their sport, the elite level, if you want to use that word. So akin to what our group is on the road marathon, half marathon, 10K kind of side. And so they can choose where they go to race, and I don't know exactly what goes into those choices, so it'd be interesting for me to hear why Western for you guys.
Sure. Well, I'll start with the comparison, right? So let's say you're a road marathoner and you're an elite, same sort of category, or be probably better, but we'll just put it on the heading of elite. But let's say you run a 2:06:43.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're one of the best guys in the world.
Yeah. And let's say that's the best time of the year. And so you're like, hey, I'm the best marathoner. And someone's like, well, actually, people have run under 2:05. And so you're like, well, yeah, but, right now I'm the best. And they're like, yeah, but you're not the best. Because there's history. And it's a standardized distance. The courses change, obviously. They're a little bit different. But in order to say that you're the best, period, you've got to run faster than anyone else ever has at that distance, right?
Yeah.
I think something similar could be said. I think Jim would probably agree with me to some extent on this, but like for me, I want to run Western States because there were some badass dudes running ultras,
so it's more
over the decades. Exactly. But like, the course has changed a little bit over the years and everything else, but like you can look at a time I just saw the other day that this guy, Mike Morton, ran 15 hours and 40 minutes in 1997. It's still like on the list of top time. I think it's top 20 still, top 25. And that dude was incredible. So, like, how do I compare to Mike Morton of 1997? Well, I can go run Western States, and I can find out. I think that's super cool because it expands the it's not just about right now. It's not just about, who you're racing against in the race. It's much bigger than that, which I find really appealing. So
I would actually contradict that completely.
There we go.
So, like, from my background...
I think you do choose for different reasons.
Yeah, of course. From my background, track and... I didn't really get into roads too much, but from a track perspective, the difference between a 359 or 358 miler and a 403 miler is night and day difference.
Totally.
They're not the same runner. They're not in the same shape. And then most people look at him like, that's 4 seconds. Like, that's the same thing. And really, it's like, they're not even in the same league, at least in that race.
100%.
So one of the biggest draws about trail running to me is that it's more effort-based. It's not just comparing times. You're not defined by your Western States time ever. And one of the biggest things, especially with me attacking a course record like at Western States, that I find is that, like, we're out there in the elements. Doesn't matter what it is, and essentially every year plays out different because of the elements. The favor, like, you're gonna have a big advantage if you have a really great day to go do it. Some of the most impressive times, if you were to only judge off of time, are completely forgotten if you only look at times. In reality, that's where a race like Western States has that history of, like, it's not just about the times, it's about the Jim Kings and Jim Howards that were just going after each other in the 80s, and it's just become like a folklore, but their times and on the course has basically made it irrelevant to compare straight up nowadays. So in my mind, it's actually quite the opposite, and I find that it's so effort-based, and as a sport, any sport, you can really just see how people pour their heart and soul into the race, and a lot of passion comes through at this race because it's one of the races where it's a peak race for anyone that's in it. It's going to be your A race, and that's something that draws me. I used it early in my career as kind of a catapult to get myself on the map, as someone that was really struggling with getting notoriety, getting attention from sponsors, everything. I went and ran Western States with like everything I had, and it ended up being like a big story at the end, and essentially that kind of put me on the map in the sport and helped catapult me to where I am today and making a living out of it.
Well, it's interesting that you would say what you said and you would say what you said because, I mean, I'm just going to dig into some of the stuff that I had farther down the list, but it makes sense to go into it now. So I feel like a little bit of an outsider perspective, but I felt like you took a lot of criticism last year in particular for seemingly going after a fast time, even though you said just a second ago that, you were more interested maybe in the competition and the win. So, am I right that you were going after a time last year? And what did you now with a year separated, a year removed? Because I remember looking at interviews afterward, and you were kind of the opinion, well, that's how I was going to do it. I went for it. I have no regrets. Has that changed? And how do you look at this year?
I'd say that goes to course records. You want to be a course record holder,
okay,
for sure. But you dig into the 4th fastest time, 6th fastest time, 20th fastest time.
Yeah,
there's a lot more stories behind that. It's not, you can't just judge the performance list per se, but at the same time, if you're Western States, if you're Timothy Olson and you hold the course record, you're the Western States course record. Like, that top spot is still a pretty big deal. As far as me running last year, I think I had mentioned this to Eric the other day of, like, in my opinion and how I judge my effort, my ability, and comparatively, it was comparatively fast or comparatively this or that. But I believe I can do stuff in ultra running that maybe other people couldn't have, or I bring other stuff to the table that hasn't been seen yet in the sport, with whether it's leg speed, heart, the ability to not run with much of a governor to begin with, which is a blessing and a curse. Like, I think it allows you to do things that your mind would completely limit you from doing, that on paper it would completely tell you, like, this is too fast, this is impossible, and everyone else says that's impossible. For me, not having that really enables me to potentially do something special and to challenge the status quo that way. And I think it's a complete mindset to try to just go get the best out of myself. And that's how I approach it. So there aren't any regrets as far as last year. I think there were mistakes. As far as course record pace and chasing it, I've also said since then, comparing the splits, like I think I ran about 21 minutes faster in the first 4 miles because I walked the majority of it the year before, being my first 100-miler. That set me up to just be under course record pace continuously for like a long time during the day. But in reality, I was losing time on each and every split, trying to back off, trying to run easier. And I basically came with the conclusion is I don't think I adjusted appropriately in the heat of the moment. And essentially the fast tempo to start kind of just carried through the rest of the day a bit more.
And I think people can understand that because I think that's not all that different than starting out too fast in a marathon.
Totally.
It doesn't hurt you at first. It catches up to you later.
And to Jim's point, he's referenced like, oh, well, the list of times is not like an absolute measure because these conditions are different.
100%.
And he's referring to last year when he was going for the course record and conditions were different. So like just to be clear about that for those that maybe aren't as informed, like there can be multiple feet of snow in the opening 20 miles. As a result, if it's been a really bad winter, they can't do much trail maintenance in the high country ahead of the race. So there'll be trees just all over the place down, blocking the trail. It can be much hotter some years than other years. So those are all factors that are going to slow you, impede you, or not. And in the case of last year, those conditions were pretty significant and made the course pretty darn slow.
I'd also interject that you comparing it to a marathon also is inaccurate because those variables make it unpredictable. It has to be effort-based. It can't be time-based because you're either overestimating or underestimating at some point. And unless I think you're truly running off of effort base and you learn to kind of harness what's right, I think you're not going to get the most out of yourself. Also, it's not scientific. So it's like, what does that mean? And what it means for me is what it's different from Eric, but that's what I find is kind of the beautiful part about ultra running is it's not scientifically backed like a 5K or a marathon. Like, how do you draw up someone's training for it?
You can't recreate those conditions in a lab on a treadmill like you can for a road marathon. You saw the Breaking 2 documentary and all the different things they did in a lab. That's going to be very difficult to recreate the Western States course in a lab.
So, I mean, I think it gets into, like, there's also road ultras. So you run a 50K road, which I think is completely redundant, and I'm frustrated with the idea of a 50K road race because it's a marathon. But then there's a 100K road, which is different. That one's tricky. There's something like Comrades that has a bit of hills. It's probably run more so once you get on the roads and you start taking out the variables, it becomes more like a calculated effort. And you start taking the splits and stuff. But until then, all the splits are just a rule of thumb and a guideline, and you need to make that decision for yourself out there.
Well, let me explore something you were getting into a second ago, which is, your particular mindset. And I'm sort of fascinated because I've watched Unbreakable, so the Western States documentary from a few years ago when
I still haven't seen that.
Oh, are you serious?
I swear.
Oh my gosh!
I hear it's great.
It's so good. It's so good.
Did you have to buy it?
That's someone give it to you for free, Jim. I would feel like no. I just watched it at a camp.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, so Unbreakable documents one particular year of Western States. Pardon me, I don't remember the exact year, but it was the year that Hal was still going for it. Jeff Rose won. He came from behind.
Maybe it was 2010.
2010.
Anton was in the race and had the lead.
Killian
So Killian was in the race.
You can't leave him out.
So, Killian brought a lot of global exposure. That year to it, for sure. So anyway, the point I'm getting at is some of those guys that we just mentioned, and yourself, and a guy like Rob Krar, there's a mindset there with those folks that really fascinates me, and I think you've been open, Rob Krar's been open, others have been open about maybe battling a little bit of depression and in your life, and maybe that actually helps your mindset on race day. You're able to go into, for lack of a better term, a deep, dark place, whereas others may not be able to. So I'm interested to see how you think that helps you, but then maybe actually discuss how it can be a bad thing, like in terms of, I don't know if anybody's ever asked you this, but it does feel like to me with some of these folks, they're sort of exchanging one vice, because there's people that come from alcoholism or drugs, and they get into ultra running, and that's, of course, you think of alcohol and drugs as a vice, but if you get into ultra running in an unhealthy way, that can be, you're just trading it off for another vice. So I'm kind of asking two things here, but let's start with just the advantages of, ultra running becoming a positive in your life, and especially from someone who's dealt with depression.
So for me, I kind of say it was mostly a time in my life that brought me to my depression. I don't think I quite chronically struggle with depression the way some other guys do, and
like it was more situational.
I would say it was more situational, and hopefully a time in my life. I know I avoid drinking heavily a lot of times because sometimes I can slip back into that mindset, and it's just not a pretty night, and it throws me off for a while. But for me, it was the catalyst to say, forget what America's pressures are, to go get a job, to go back to school, to go be picture perfect, and how I kind of foresaw my life going and being successful. It was a catalyst to push me to a point of I'm going to put something that makes me happy and that I love doing as a priority in my life. And so that's what kind of boiled it down to me. And my hard time was when I was in the Air Force active duty, of just I didn't do well and things didn't go well for me. And so afterwards I decided that Flagstaff was the place that was going to work best for me. I didn't know as much as I do know now about Flagstaff, and if I did, I think it would have been hands down the choice. But I'm pretty fortunate that I did move to Flagstaff, and for me, it was mainly the catalyst that pushed me towards this, and then also whether it's self-doubt about on the track. I think for me, I didn't really have the mental breakthrough on the track to really have the time breakthroughs, because I think a lot of times you got to have some sort of breakthrough on the track, because I think you get mental barriers in general, and I felt like I got stuck a bit on the track and never really ran to my potential. And it goes back to not defining what you can run in 50 miles, 100 miles, and that's a huge thing for me. And I think maybe a big reason why I found success is because of the lack of mental barriers of what time to do, what effort to go for. So, but in general, I think as a community, depression is pretty common and pretty high, and a lot of people seem to come from some sort of background with that. And for us, I think whether it's exploring, adventuring, being in nature, having goals, I think it can help structure your life when you start training for races. There's a lot of really good positives. So even if it is a vice, I think it brings more positives into your life and how you can structure things and be more goal-oriented, which carries over into other parts of your life. And so even though you still might have a vice, I think it, in many ways, even if you take it to an excess, which essentially ultra running is, I think it still has its benefits that outweigh its vices.
Sure. I think the positives outweigh the negatives, but an offshoot of that question that I wanted to get into was, I don't know, I've heard it referred to as the Strava culture. So that idea that you guys are sort of hooked, in a good way, right? On running, on constantly sort of that endorphin high, if you will, because the running that you do is a lot more adventurous, truthfully, than what we do. I mean, it really is. And I mean, and we have our own struggles with the monotony of what we have to do. But one of the things that you guys don't have to struggle with necessarily, even though it seems like you do because you're running 150 miles a week sometimes, but it's not monotonous. It's these adventurous runs through the canyon and up and down the trails, and they're much your mind is a lot freer. Exactly, because you're constantly looking down.
So I'd say the process is very enjoyable.
That's right. Absolutely. But all that to say, there still is that sort of, at least among the people that I talk to, we look at you guys from the outside and we say, gosh, if they just wouldn't have done that, they wouldn't have gotten hurt, and then they'd be fine. But at the same time, as you kind of just alluded to, that's what makes it fun, and that's what makes you good. So how do you balance that? How do you balance that, like, want and need to be adventurous and break barriers, as you say, with your mileage per week, with your vert per week, etc., with also the knowledge that, hey, this is a positive in my life and I want to do this for a long time.
Right.
What's the balance?
Well, I think I'll let Eric go on that more, because I think he finds a better balance with working with a job. Doesn't quite do as much mileage as I do, but also finds success. But I would throw out actually between our group, one of our ways that we find success is actually we don't have a coach.
Yeah.
None of us are coached. So from that, in my experience, is I overtrained a lot with a coach, and I think with a coach there's more pressure on that you put on yourself to do the training plan and to have that perfect buildup. And when I stick only to that perfect buildup, typically I'm not ready to go by the day I want to be.
Okay.
Where when I'm self-coached, it's like, hey, I'm pretty tired. Like, and it's more just being honest with yourself.
I would think it would be the opposite. That's an interesting answer.
I completely. I've had the problem since high school, and I completely. I'm more embarrassed to not run the miles prescribed than to say I'm tired. Okay. So I would. But you're
famous.
Myself.
But to be fair, you're famous for really crazy. Well, crazy is the wrong word, but you're famous for really intense.
Let's use crazy. I like crazy.
Really, really big weeks, really big runs.
But I think I find myself with a better balance. Like, I have really big runs, but I think I also have, like, and then it goes to a trail. It's beautiful because it's not measurable.
Yeah.
And it goes, you know what? I'm going to go on a new route today.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what I run. Like, no one can compare that to my last route. So, like, sometimes I try to add on just a little bit here or there, even on my usual route, just to throw off the average pace or the overall time. So there's not just, every split. And especially if you add something weird on to begin the loop.
Yeah.
It throws off all the splits, and then you're like,
that makes it
doesn't
tough.
matter.
Give me a percentage. How many runs do you do with the purpose of, with measurement in mind, some sort of measurement, either comparing it to how you've done before or comparing it to how someone else has done before, how much vert is in the run, etc., and then give me the percentage of runs that are just pure enjoyment. Not that you don't enjoy the first.
Yeah,
set.
percentage is. So I would say half.
Yeah.
Half are probably just go out there and just knock out some stuff. For me, I do make weekly goals, which helps keep me on track. So I tend to pick routes that will get me there eventually.
Yeah.
But then it probably, if I want to fit in a fast A1, I might pick a route that's a little more hilly to begin with, so that I have time to go do a harder workout or something else like that. And for us, the Grand Canyon's a really easy way to just get stat boosters for your whole week of training. But in all honesty, there's not probably anyone that does something like what we do in the canyon even once a week, and we're doing it 2-3 times a week. But it goes to a bit effort based, and I think we split up even climbing out of the canyon like every single time, because mainly because I kind of set the tone with it, but but it's I'm a big believer of, you got to find your own rhythm in the canyon. If you go too fast, you're gonna blow up. If you go too slow, you can still blow up, and no matter what, it's gonna hurt. So just find your rhythm and get out of the canyon, and we'll all get out faster if everyone just listens to their own pace.
I'm gonna skip your answer real quick.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to miss this opportunity to segue into the we. So Jim's discussing we, and I think you're referring to your group, which is not coached, but it is a group, and there's sort of an informal thing going on between you guys, and you called it, but it's becoming more formal. I would have to say, called the Coconino Cowboys.
Yep.
So it's you two, it's Jared Hazen, it's Cody Reed, and it's Tim Fryricks.
Right.
And all from different backgrounds, but all sort of at the high level of the sport, all living in Flagstaff. Your buddies, I see you hanging out. It's really turned into quite a cool brand. You and I talked about this a little bit.
We did,
And so I'll talk business for a second as it relates to Ultra and as it relates to what we do. So I'm fascinated and really impressed, quite honestly, with the brand the Cowboys have been able to create, because you seem to have a connection with your fans that is way more personal than I see happening in the track world and the road marathon world. Now, I I'm biased, but I think we try to do the best we can. I think we do better than most groups. But there's something, and I don't know, maybe you guys know, maybe you don't even know. I don't know if it's the adventurousness of what you do, or if it's that Strava culture we talked about, or why is it that your connection seems to be so deep with your fans?
That's some good reasons, but you shoot up.
Well, here's like one anecdote to that. So look at the sorts of races, right, the NAZ elite athletes are running.
Yeah.
So the mile to the marathon, right?
Mm-hmm.
All on the road. They're all typically really big, right, races. So interaction, the elite corrals are sanctioned off. Like there are relevant differences.
You're put on a pedestal a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. Whereas in our sport, the events are much smaller. Like you'll be standing
fight
in the
for the starting line just like everybody else.
Exactly.
Okay.
Nobody's
Someone else is just like, I want to be in the starting line photo. I'm like, no, Jim,
trying to win
not
this
today.
thing.
Yeah.
And so that's a big difference. And just by way of example, there was a local trail race here last weekend, Big Pine over in Fort Tuthill. There's a 6K, a 13K, a 27K, a 54K, so up to 54K. But for events even as short as the 13K, there's an aid station. And there's aid station.
And you stop at the aid station.
Well, but here's
not
something that
short.
Well, right, but the reason I'm bringing this up is Jared and Cody and me. We were all at the aid station for 5 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were just hanging out. People come through. We fill their water. We talk to them. The interaction is much more intimate, I think, in our sport than you find in the road events, marathon down to the mile. I think that's a huge difference.
I would say that there's a bigger disconnect with track and road runners in the fact that how elite and the times you guys are running are just unfathomable, and people don't understand completely sometimes how fast that really is. Like, it's incredible. And to get to that point, it's not typically going to be your college kid or your kid 23, 24 just out of college. It's going to take until you're in your upper 20s before you really start continually mixing it up year after year at the top. And you're not getting as many people as a bigger community probably doing track races.
Yeah.
It's an elite or younger sport. So if you're not good enough to do it post-collegiately, that's kind of the end of your career, unless you move to the roads. The roads are pretty open, but again, you're corralled. You have your own little bubble. You're taken care of. You're put up in the hotel.
Yeah.
Us, we come in ultra running. There's more I might put up a tent at a race. Especially when I first started, I'd put up a tent next to a race at a starting line, and I'd be camping it out with everybody else. And hey,
That's
can
true.
I just come warm up by your fire? Because it's 4:30 a.m. I got to drink this coffee, and the race starts in an hour and a half. And and there's memories of me getting into the sport that way. And I think there's more relation as well, because you see the elites in our sport suffer a lot more. Elites in track and road running typically are so good that it's especially on their best days and the ones crossing the line first, looks painless.
They don't look like
it looks
they are. They don't
flawless.
look
And then the amount of work that they put in to do that is just incredible, and people don't see the grind day to day.
Yeah.
Ours, whether you win or not, you see the suffering, and there's a common bond that way.
I might quote that, and that'll be the.
You see the suffering.
Yeah, you see the suffering.
So I think
it humanizes.
It makes total sense. Well, and I'll give, I'm not just saying that without tangible evidence of it being true. Explain the what just happened with Squirrel's Nut Butter. And the special promotion they did with you guys. And this is not a set up clip. I really think this is a cool story.
Well, yeah. So we have companies that want to do collaborations with us. Yeah. Like that, how cool. That's super rad. But so I think companies see more opportunity with a group like us in a sport like ours.
It's niche, of that, so they have such a direct opportunity to talk to people.
Right, so by way of example, we have these Coconino Cowboy socks.
Yes.
If you're listening to this, you don't actually see them, but they're pretty cool. So that was a collaboration that Jim got started with Drymax, which is his sock sponsor, and a couple the other 3 guys on the team. I'm not with Drymax, but they did a collaboration there with him, which is pretty awesome. It's got our logo on the sock. It's got the kind of the Arizona flag is the idea there with the rest of it.
They actually designed this.
Yeah,
like,
it's cool. And
for us, and we're just like, that looks rad.
And
do something, and we didn't actually know initially that they were selling it, but they're available. I think online you got to buy them in a 3-pack, and then if you want to buy them solo, you got to go out to Tahoe and buy them at Alpenglow this week.
Yeah, so gotta
but then the point is they're selling.
Yeah, totally.
And see, that's the whole thing with sponsorship, right? It's ultimately, unfortunately, a lot of the athletes don't get this, but they think, oh, well, I ran fast, so I should get sponsored. No.
Right.
It's, can you sell product?
Yeah.
And you guys are proving that you can sell product.
Well, and it's a little bit of both.
I didn't even know this when I first started, though, but if you want to talk to a company, you ask for who's in charge of marketing.
Yes.
You fall under marketing as an
That's
athlete.
right.
You're a tool to market product to sell.
And I don't mean you sell the product.
Sure.
The onus is on the company to sell the product, but you sell it indirectly in the sense that people like this brand.
Yeah,
this is a strong brand.
They can invest in us or a brand instead of putting up a billboard.
Right.
That's right. That's right. And I think the money is, I mean, when you understand how much money it costs to, take out a full page ad in Runner's World, then it starts to make total sense to spend X number of dollars producing this product and getting it on people's feet, or in the case of Squirrel's Nut Butter, getting that product in people's hands, because that's ultimately better marketing.
Yeah,
it's way more direct, way more personal.
Yep.
They're wearing it or they're using it.
They're using it, right. Yeah, so we had a special edition stick with Squirrel's Nut Butter, that's what you're referring to there, where we actually all signed
anti-chafing
the sticks.
Product.
Yeah, of course, right, Squirrel's Nut Butter, a lot of this audience probably is less familiar. Yeah, Squirrel's Nut Butter is an anti-chafe product that is largely in the ultra-running trail market, but
your alternative to Body Glide.
Exactly.
I didn't want to say it.
Much.
I know, but if you know what Body Glide is,
this
is an improved version of Body Glide.
That's right.
That's made in Flagstaff.
There you go. I like that. But yeah, it was the same thing where it's like we know the owner. He wants to help support us and help us out. He's like, hey, what can we do? And we just brainstormed, came up with the idea of doing a special edition
and you
stick.
Guys, the Cowboys, each signed this particular special edition stick.
Every single
Sold
one.
it for how much money?
They're $19.99.
How much? And is that what a stick normally costs?
$16.90.
So it's just slightly more.
Yeah.
With all the signatures, you made how many of them?
Well, that's actually still to be determined. There's at least 500 though.
There's at least 500. Yeah. How many did you sell on day one?
Like 250 in the first couple days.
That's really amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really amazing. I don't know. I would never use a name, but I don't know. I think there's pretty big stars in the track and field world that could sign something and not sell that many.
Really?
I really
that's
do.
Crazy. Yeah.
I really do. That's But
like
cool.
you said, it's
cool.
that connection that we just seem to have. So.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. How are we doing on time?
We're good. We got another 15 minutes.
Great. Well, I think you guys have touched on a couple things that I want to come back to, and so I'll come back to Jim on talking about his career and deciding not to continue on the track. And I think one thing we didn't dive into was just how good Jim was. I mean, he's good. He was really good. Foot Locker finalist in high school. Sub 14 guy on the track, 29 flat guy on the track. For Air Force, and it's not easy to train when you're at the Air Force Academy, so those are really good times. And so certainly those kind of times are the same type of people that do try to run post-collegiately on the track or in that like 10K, half marathon, maybe marathon on the road world, and yet he chose to go into ultra running. But I think one thing you see come up on the message boards, I guess if you would call it, or the Twitter or whatever, is like people trying to, because I think there are people in the ultra world that of course came from the shorter distance world, and there are people in the shorter distance world that are starting to understand ultra and follow it, so there's this like crossover happening. So inevitably the questions arise, well, what could Jim do if he ran a marathon? What could Killian do if he ran a marathon? And I've heard people ask you this before, but now as we sit here today, where do you stand on that? I mean, do you think now with all this ultra running, it would be difficult to go back and try that, or do you think actually you could do very, very well in a road marathon?
Could I start real quick?
Yeah, you start.
I'm gonna just. So Nick Arciniaga.
Yeah.
Was planning to run the North Face 50 mile.
211
last
marathoner
year.
times 5, I
Yes,
think.
and so
at least 4.
Runner's World, there's somewhere, I forget, competitor, well, I guess, anyways, whatever publication said, ultra running is going to get its first 211 marathoner. And like a couple of us, at least around here that are friends with Jim, just kind of laughed and we're like, there's already a 211 marathoner running ultras. Like, Jim could run a 2, like, that's what a 211 talent gets you on the trail, in addition to some other things. Like, it's already happening.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see how that world would be offended by just the assumption
right.
that just because so-and-so had run 211 or a 102 or whatever in the half, that they could just go and just mop up the field. And I've seen it happen before. Again, like a guy like Mike Aish, who I was a huge fan of in college. He's 213 guy. I think he tried it maybe a little later in his career.
Right,
I think he had tried it maybe a little earlier. But there was just this assumption that he would win everything, and it didn't happen.
No,
because it's a different skill set, and it also takes time to learn. But I think that's what you're getting at.
And I think that's another reason people are so interested in Jim, is he seems to be someone who could do both.
Yeah.
And I think that's super rare. Like, to be dominant in ultra running and potentially to be able to do something like a 211.
Well, it's I want to get to Jim's answer. But it's not unlike, the marathon world, the road marathon world, where there's no guarantee that just because you were good at the mile and the 5 and the 10 that you're going to dominate the marathon. Jared Ward, as he would tell you, is going to get his butt kicked in the mile, the 5K, the 10K, and guess what? He was sixth in the Olympics.
Yeah, did some of that butt kick.
Yeah, there you go. So like, when you have races, the farther you go up in distance, the more specialized things are, and the more rare it is to see someone that can run across the board.
Exactly.
Sure.
But
anyway,
so my short answer would be we might see.
Yeah.
So we'll see a couple things, I guess. One, how difficult or naturally to shift down will be.
Yeah.
So over the next 2 years, I want to focus a little more on some road ultra records and comrades, which I think requires a bit different training than what I'm currently doing. I'm a little worried about it because I think my history with the repetitive stuff on flat, it could set me up for overusage injury, so that's something I'll really have to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
But personally, I want to plan on running the Olympic trials and the marathon as my debut marathon, which is kind of skewed in a bit because I've got a lot of experience running further than that and dealing with a lot of the problems that the marathon could present to someone coming up in distance. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. I want to qualify for the marathon and make it my debut by going through the half marathon, which opens up later this year. Yeah. And then we'll see if that comes easy or not. For me and kind of how my career's progressed, I also look at it as, is this worth my time to really do? Yeah. I found a very good niche that I'm good at, and it's not necessarily worth it for me to go backwards, but in my mind, if I could really nail something special, it's only going to live to be even bigger. Yeah. So I look at it as that's something that really excites me. Of on paper, people say that's impossible, people say you can't do that, so that goes to run without that governor and go find out. Chances are probably not going to do anything too exciting in the marathon, but I also go back and forth. So the marathon's another event that you get defined by your time. Yeah. Everyone knows the marathon time. That's your marathon. Like, that's who you are as a marathoner, period. You're not faster, you're not slower, that's your time. And now it almost makes me want to almost even skip the marathon at the U.S. trials if I go, look, if I don't have a shot at taking top 3, I'm probably more worth my time to try to go run that 211 marathon on a flat course that's actually fast. And now I'm at least a fast marathoner, where if I hop in the trials and say third place could be 214 in Atlanta, if it, like, depending on the conditions, it could be just really unique. Or you look at Boston this last year, the times were way off, and you kind of look at the runners that
Ben's still having nightmares.
I mean, they're still Boston champs, and B, I think it's kind of that marathon was really appreciated, I think, in the ultra world of just it shows that grit that maybe you might have to find to have success in an ultra.
Well, I think, but you might have the same thought when he was talking, but like I think that would favor you if it's hot in Atlanta.
Well, and I would also
yeah.
So and I would also say there's a measurable aspect though to say at the trials, like I was digging what you were saying because I'm thinking to myself, but at the trials, whether you finish the top 3 or 5th or 6th or 8th or 20th, at least there's a measurable aspect. Like because everybody runs it.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's even more so than Westerns, where a lot of top people run it, but they have other choices.
Sure.
Everybody will run the trials.
True.
So whatever place you get, you can say, I came from the ultra world and I'm the 9th best, 3rd best, 5th best, 2nd best, 1st best marathoner.
Yeah, that's a good point. So that's a good...
I'm not trying to talk you into it.
Yeah. No, I mean, right now it's mainly... I probably only see myself training for one marathon.
Yeah.
I only see myself training for one marathon in my career.
Yeah.
And it's where do I want to use that one chance? Where the other chances are going to be, or even if I did run a marathon, I might do one as a comrades build up. Or even the trials is going to be part of a bigger picture towards comrades in a downhill year 2 years from now. Where next year I think it plays to my advantage coming from a trail background, having a bit more strength built in because it's going to be an uphill year. So it's all fast though, and it's all rolly. So we'll see.
Well, I certainly know that your background on the track and your background in the longer stuff now could yield this time, but I'm sure there are some people listening thinking, well, does he think he's just going to knock out a sub 104 half, no problem?
Oh, it's 104 now.
I think
it's 104.
Yeah, you gotta run 103 something. I think I can run faster than even. I think realistically I could run 102.
Yeah.
101's probably stretch. No, it's more than a stretch. I'm probably not gonna run 101, and even if I did try to run one, I'm not gonna go for that pace. To be honest.
Yeah.
And you don't need to have a good marathon.
Yeah.
So I think it would be good to run something not just under 64, but I'm also planning on probably at least 2 attempts on it. I don't think the first one's necessarily going to get it unless it just depends how things come back or don't come back. And then it could be a situation where some guys that have ran consistent Olympic trials qualifiers, all of a sudden they might have moved on to something else for a little bit and they come back and it's just not coming back the same. It just, maybe not. But you don't necessarily need a 64 speed to do something like comrades or the American record in the 50 mile or 100K or a world record in the 100K right now I think is still vulnerable. So as far as my career, especially the half marathons, like no risk. I'm not really interested in running a 2:00 or 2:18 to qualify for the trials. I'll probably just take a pass because if I can't qualify in the half, I don't think I'll be competitive enough where I'll be happy with in the marathon. And I can focus my time and energy and training on races that are going to be more impactful to my career.
Yeah. Is there any sort of chip on your shoulder left over or desire to somehow prove yourself to that world?
I feel like I'm a representative for the ultra world. I think in general we get picked on as slow runners, people that go slog it out, people that eat pizzas in the race, this and that, which it is an eating contest, and that's a really good skill to have. But I think a lot of times, depending on your background, the people that are talking smack, and even especially maybe college kids, like I say now, like be careful what event you talk smack on because I used to talk trash to the steeplers on the team and then the 10K guys, and I became both of them by the end of college just to try to get to NCAAs my senior year. And then the whole while, you don't even like take the low blows at the ultra runners because you're like, that's too easy. You see
hanging fruit,
barefoot guys running through the mountains in Leadville area, and you're just like, you're kidding me, right? Like you can't take yourself seriously. But there's a whole just mindset to it, and it just goes to learning how to deal with grit and harnessing that, and there's other attributes to be a successful ultra runner in a lot of ways. I think you can take that 62-minute half marathoner and find the niche races and just run away with a lot. I think you find that sort of speed in the Xterra. I mean, Joe Gray, newly HOKA guy, is kind of like the epitome of that niche. And you see guys like Andy Wacker, Pat Smythe, that have had real good success with that leg speed, but they kind of stay in that niche. I think, like marathoning, it takes a bit of a further commitment to extend it even further in the ultras. Of you're not specializing in the half marathon. You got to commit to the marathon. You can't be that 10K guy that's gonna still crush the marathon. It's typically one or the other.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask you then, Eric. That's a good segue into this. You know, when he mentioned Pat and Joe and Andy. You're still pretty connected, especially living in Flagstaff, with the road marathon world, and you follow it to an extent. You do these podcasts. Is there anybody right now in the U.S. scene in the road marathon, top road marathoner, that you think could move up like Jim did and become a good ultra runner?
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. I think your favorite race from recently is a really good indicator. 2018 Boston.
Yeah.
I was talking about this with someone recently. Another ultra runner, we were like, oh, Desi would crush it. Like, if she'd be a great ultra runner. Like, those conditions, like running, she won by 5 minutes.
Because obviously she handled the fueling.
Yep.
You know, and
well, you had variables.
Difficult
you had a
conditions,
bunch of different variables.
So she handled it mentally, but also physically.
Exactly. Yeah. And Yuki, that was no question.
Yuki's no question.
You're right, even before Boston.
Yeah.
But he would obviously, and wait, is his best 2:11? What's his best?
No, sub 2:10.
Oh, he's been sub 2:10.
He's like 208. Dang.
That's insane.
I would like, my 100K race that I want to go after a fast time, one of the places I want to do is Lake Saroma, which is Japan.
Okay.
And
UV Yuki.
Yeah, I would love to go against Yuki.
This is making this podcast so great.
That would be my preference, because he just after Boston he ran like a 70-something K.
Yeah.
73K.
It wasn't out of this world by any means, I would say, but shows an interest of like, you want to run 20-something more K and line up. And Lake Saroma is one of the like classic Japanese races that they throw down awesome 100K times every world leading.
Yep.
I think it's on the road.
Okay.
I honestly don't know much about it right now. I've got other
they're usually
races
pretty road oriented.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's on the road. Yeah.
Okay. That is cool. Well, let's push for it. Let's try to make it happen.
I agree.
Okay, I have one last question because I'm kind of required to ask this since we're less than 2 weeks out. What plans can we share about Western States, if any, in terms of race strategy for next weekend?
Go for it.
Well, it's my first 100-mile race, but I think that I think a lot of people, at least at the higher level of the sport, who find themselves at a 100-mile race for the first time are typically younger than I am or have less experience. So I'm not too intimidated by the fact that it's my first one, but still.
Because your farthest race is
100K, 62 miles, but like you got to make the jump from somewhere.
Because there's nothing really in between.
Yeah, like
typically.
You're jumping from 50 miles or 100K, more or less.
Yeah.
And the difference between those two is marginal. Like there's a difference, but it's not too significant.
It seems different to me.
It's a little different.
It's a little different, but like not. Yeah. In any case, I think like you got to worry about. So I sat down with Rob Crart recently.
Great.
Who has won? Another Flagstaff guy, and he's won Western States twice. And I will share one piece of information that he shared with me that I thought was very useful. And he said, when I ran that race, I was asking myself as the race progressed, especially early on, when I had to make decisions about, do I stay with this person now? Do I kind of let them go? Like, do I take this downhill a little harder? Do I tone it back? Every time he asked himself one of those questions, he said, I was asking it from two different perspectives. Will this allow me physically later in the race to run well? And will this allow me mentally later in the race to run well? So he sort of like a little bit changed my view about like what to think about. But his point was like, all the physical challenges you're going to face over 100 miles, the mental ones are going to be every bit as important.
Interesting.
So you need to ask yourself, like, what's going to put you in a place mentally? The last third of the course is the most runnable. What's going to put you in a place mentally at mile 70 to be able to still be running hard. So that doesn't really tell you.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah, like it's more abstract or broad, I guess, in terms of race strategy. But I think you can take a lot away from that.
Well, and I guess I'll ask and follow up. Oftentimes when we run, for example, a cross country race, I have a similar line of thought, which is, hey, let's answer these questions before the race ever even starts. And the answer always being yes,
right.
Because it's only 10K cross country.
Yes, sure.
And so, am I going to hit this turn hard? Yes. Am I going to go if somebody goes? Yes. Am I going to hit the downhills hard? Yes. Am I going to pop up the uphills hard? Yes. It's always yes.
Yeah.
But in the ultra, can it be, I'm going to say no until X point, and then I'm going to say yes? Is it something you can even do beforehand, or do you have to trust yourself?
Definitely the tried and true old school strategy.
Sure.
Right, and that would be the strategy.
No. Yep.
I would probably try to make it more to just the yeses.
Yeah.
Of course you're going to go with the pack. Of course you're going to make the move. And that's how I see the sport going as it gets deeper and more competitive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I've done the yeses, and sometimes it comes back to, well, maybe that should have been a no.
Yeah.
So it is
Maybe
long enough to bite you back.
Yeah. It's a long enough race that I think sometimes you've got to say no if you're going to get the most out of yourself. Because remember, the question is, how fast can I get from mile 0 to mile 100? Mile 100. Yeah. It's not how fast can I get from mile 0 to mile 3.1. Yeah. Those are just very, very different things. So that's an interesting perspective or anecdote that you just brought in, because you're always saying yes to more speed. Yes. But I think over 100 miles, you've got to know when to say no. I think the races won or lost based on an aggregate of very, very small decisions. And if you answer them right, I think you've got a chance, and if you don't, you don't. Some people have more margin for error, like Jim, but at some point it'll get you.
Okay, how can they follow you guys next weekend? It's a 15+ hour race.
So I think the best way to follow us and support us would probably be through Coconino Cowboys on Instagram and Twitter. I think our guy Mike Hermsmeyer is going to be on that during race day, and with really timely updates with photos and stuff. He's really good about that. There's also a live feed on I Run Far on Twitter is typically how most people
I've followed in the past.
Most people follow it that way. If you want photos and stuff about us personally, you'll probably get a more biased media from Coconino Cowboys with real-time updates and stuff, but more field, broader, less biased reporting. I Run Far does really great at Western States, and it's fun because you can go out for a dinner and you can just check your Twitter every now and then. You can go run some errands. Look, we're running all day, so just do your normal day and check in every now and then, and we're still going.
And then certainly for like the track and road folks who probably may already follow, but Sidious Mag, Stephen Kirsch is going to be out there.
They'll be out there.
And I believe he will be doing live updates as well.
So that'll be really cool because it goes to bridging that gap to just a more unified sport where it's the same. In my mind, it's the same sport but different communities. Yeah. And I think with my background a lot, I feel like I can help talk both ways. Yeah. And I think it would be really cool to just have a bigger sport. I think everyone's better off if everyone in ultra running is track fans and everyone in track are ultra fans up all the way through the distance. I think we're all going to be better for it.
Yeah, definitely. Ben, I think we have a few Twitter questions before we finish.
New things from Twitter. I'm sorry, I was ready to wrap up. It was going to be a great climax there, but I'll ask these in a minute. Okay, let's see. If I'm sorry, what is this name?
Oh, Turtle.
If Turtle Miller were to give you a 3-beer lead at the Silverton Beer Mile, could you beat him? I don't know who that's for.
I think this is to Jim.
Okay.
I think this is to me.
That's for Jim.
That means I'd probably have about 7 to 8 minutes at 9,300 feet to get one beer and one lap done. It would be close.
All right, fair enough. For Eric, where do you buy your cowboy hats?
Ooh, most of mine have been gifted to me. I don't know that I've made maybe one purchase over the years.
Yeah. That's cool. And the other one we already answered. So that's it. Really appreciate you guys joining. That was cool. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I wish you the best of luck next weekend at Western States. It's going to be awesome.
We'll miss you, Ben.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wish you could be there. Thanks, Jim. All right.